Hello and welcome to the 167 podcast. In today's episode, we recognize that our world has got problems and our leaders need to be problem solvers. Stick around to find out how. There's a saying in the Bible that everybody in your room in a coffee shop Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the 167 podcast. We're so excited to be with you from a location, destination recording today, aka Swain's Garden.
The garden.
The Garden.
Well, isn't this where everything started for humanity? The garden.
Are you just changing topic right now of what we're going to speak about? Because that's a moment right there.
We could just go with it. I don't know. It feels like we need to just
The origin story.
put a parenthesis in here and saying we are recording the 167 podcast off our location because of load shedding.
Yes.
Yet we are in this beautiful garden, beautiful setting, probably with dogs barking and birds chirping.
Yeah.
Cars driving past, but it'll be fun.
You're going to hear everything today.
Certainly.
And but we're rolling with it, and we're going to have fun with it. And we want to welcome everybody that is joining us. If you're watching, so good for you to be joining us on YouTube, or if you are listening on any of our streaming platforms. Hey, really good to be with you guys. We were actually just at a conference lately where we were introduced with some other listeners of the 167 podcast.
Big shout out to them if they're listening to this one.
Jeez, yeah, awesome. It was
You know
really,
who you are.
You know who you are. It was really cool in Joburg to be able to meet some people. And we're so glad that the 167 is adding value and is helping, because that's kind of the goal. That's always been the heart of the podcast. And if you're new here, the 167 is based on the idea and the truth of there's 168 hours in a week. One of them is maybe spend in a church, a house of worship, but you've got 167 other hours where you can grow, develop, become better, become closer to Jesus. So that's what we like to do in these conversations. And sometimes we do it out of the studio.
Out of the studio.
We just break free from the confines of the walls.
You know what? We should actually film an acoustic worship set here with some lights in the trees.
We really could.
I almost think we should. Like, imagine Christmas online. I'm jumping.
We can dream for that. We don't want to expose any of that yet. That's for a couple months' time.
It's coming.
Well, we're excited. We have been chatting through some really cool content. We've been speaking a bit about leadership, speaking a bit about vision, and today we're going to speak a little bit about problem solving.
That's right.
And as a leader, it is the key and the theme that we see throughout the scripture and throughout the Bible, that the leaders are problem solvers. And I think in today's world there are a lot of problems. There's a lot of things that people need to overcome and try to overcome. And really, it is one of the roles of a leader to be able to assist in that, to assist in solving problems, to come alongside people, to provide solutions, but I think quite importantly to help people find the solution for themselves that is still biblically aligned and kind of from the heart of God, because there's a lot of ways that we can solve issues. There's a lot of issues and problems that we might find, and before Jesus we find other solutions to those problems, other answers, and after Jesus he becomes pretty much the big answer. But in today's podcast we want to speak a bit about problem solving, why it's important, and as leaders where we find problem solving kind of prevalent in our teams and with the people that we lead. And maybe just to start off with you, Sven, a question with regards to problem solving. Have you found that problem solving has been something that's been quite present kind of in your leadership journey, or has it really just been smooth sailing for you and everything kind of just goes your way?
That would be nice. I can't wait to open the chapter of that book. But no, I think what leaders tend to do is get frustrated with the problems that they have to solve.
Yeah.
Because if you're in charge, people are going to bring problems to your door. And I think it's about helping other people to solve problems that be kind of before they get to you. Yeah. So that you're solving the biggest ones. Problem solving is, that's the point, right? If people don't know what to do, so they look to someone who can lead the way. Yeah. And I think we don't necessarily have to come up with solutions ourselves. We do have to get to a solution and have faith for it. And that's why we need leaders. We need leaders to solve big problems, because there are problems on global scales, and who do we allow us to lead? The people who've got the answers to the problems. Yeah. And so I think problem solving is just part of it, and I think that it's also encouraging, because if you can solve a problem, people naturally give you influence.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know how to get influence, solve someone's problem.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key instances of that we find in scripture is kind of the story of the young man David, who, he wasn't really asked to solve this problem. He kind of threw himself at the problem and solved it himself. And we're talking about the Goliath problem, the issue that the army of Israel had with this giant who pretty much did exactly whatever he wanted to do, and David solved that issue. And
I love just how calmly you say that. Like, yeah, he just sorted. It's like mafia, you know. Like, he just solved the problem. He literally chopped the giant's head off. And we're like, yeah, he solved the issue.
And how old was he at the time?
Like 16 or 15 or whatever. 17.
The problem one of the big problems that David solved was massive.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and I think we saw kind of a trajectory kind of from, well, it was before that he was anointed to be king. But he went about the journey of kind of solving problems. And what was quite interesting and something that Phil Pringle also alludes to in some of the talks that he does is that, like you said, that when we solve problems, we get given influence, and we see that in the life of David. But David went about solving problems privately as well before he went about solving them on a public level. I mean, we know that before David he was introduced to Goliath or the armies, he was a shepherd boy, and he chilled at the back. And when, like we spoke about, when Samuel came to anoint the next king, I mean, Jesse didn't even think about bringing David to the front. He was at the back, he was with the sheep. But in that time, he was looking after the sheep, and he was solving some problems the sheep had, which were wolves and lions and bears and these
small
types
problems.
of things. Small problems in our head is crazy, but small problems compared to maybe the Goliath problem. And the teaching and the thought there was so powerful, is that as leaders, it's great. We want to set goals to solve problems for people on a public level, but we also need to develop the ability of not allowing problems to go unsolved in our own lives.
That's good.
Never mind how big or how small. We want to be quick to find a solution, and it might be a journey. It might take a while. It might not be something that happens overnight.
Yeah.
But if we identify something in our lives that we're like, cool, as leaders or as people, this is not something that I want to live with for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, to go about solving that issue. And 100%. I believe that's when you can have some more strength and authority on a public level.
100%. I think that's the life of a follower of Christ. Like, you have to overcome, and as from Pringle, I think also says, like, if you are going to be an overcomer, you actually have to overcome some things, and that's part of problem solving.
Yeah.
I find that the biggest issue with problem solving for me, and when I look at other people's lives, and often my own life as well, is that when you think the problem is too big for you, everything shuts down within you, and you actually just don't even, you rather hide from it. I think it's just about getting an attitude where any problem is solvable. Yeah. You know, and we want to be a church that that solves problems, that uses creative solutions to things. And very often people write off sometimes a new move that God wants to bring into the world because of the existence of a problem, and they're like, no, that's something else. Yeah. And so they never find a solution through that. And I just wonder how many amazing businesses could be started if people had the faith to solve a big problem, or ministries or churches, or just things, interesting new ways of doing things.
Don't you find that attitude plays a huge role in how we solve a problem? I'm just, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about...
Probably the biggest.
I'm thinking about the guys that went to go spy out the land. And, 8 of the spies saw the problem, the giants, the inhabitants, but this was the promised land. And they said, well, we're grasshoppers in their eyes and our own eyes. 100%. So their attitude had already kind of cut them off. But then there were 2 who said, let's take this land. And like you said, any problem is solved, especially when, the one that is greater, he's greater inside of us than anything in the world. And we can go and take this problem. I find that attitude, even for me, like, I think something that I might struggle with slightly is I don't like being wrong. And when you have...
Yeah, I know.
You're like, I haven't noticed that. And when you have...
Just looked in the mirror.
And I find that when you have kind of that mentality, you can be hesitant in making decisions because you're quite nervous about kind of making the wrong one. And you're like, well, let me take more time, let me think about it more. And then you can maybe struggle a bit with being decisive and this is the decision we're going to make. Because you also don't want to be a leader who makes a choice and then kind of chops and changes. And it's like, let's go. Because sometimes it's required, but I mean, we want to be decisive in the way that we can kind of lead and help people. And I think for me, it's just about God has got a blueprint for my life, and I'm going to make mistakes. He can use that anyway. I don't have to be perfectly right in every decision that I make. God is still bigger and greater to be able to use. If I didn't make the best choice there, or I didn't make a great decision there, he can still use it, and we can still get to the destination that you want to be. But I mean, that's an inner. I find you're quite decisive. I find sometimes.
I'm glad that I come across that way. I think I just make a decision, because I find in the absence of decision, you still make a decision. You're just letting someone else make the decision for you.
That's good. Yeah.
So like between Lara and I, we're a good pairing. Because sometimes she won't make a decision, and I've just got to say to her, if without making a decision, you're making a decision, and then she'll bring great perspective, so I can make a better decision. Sometimes I make a decision, it's just a stupid decision. And so I think it's a good pairing like that. But you know what, I listen to some entrepreneurial voices, and some of the stuff that they say in success for entrepreneurialism is fail fast and fail often. Because it's through the failure that you learn to improve. And one of the things that's frustrating me about a problem that exists in the church world today, because of obviously we've been through this whole COVID thing, and whoever's got the problem to solve COVID, please stand up, we will follow. But there's this sort of rejection to an online expression of church. And this, we just want to go back to in person. Now, I agree with that, but then there's some people who are completely rejecting in person, right? So I'm trying to understand: is this a problem that can be solved, or are we just writing it off again? Because clearly, this online world is here to stay for quite some time. Does it need boundaries? Absolutely. But why don't we solve problems to find a creative way through it, rather than saying it's either this or that? So the way I think about it is that being in person is better, but online is still good. It's not a replacement. It's not a substitute, but it is a supplement. But there are ways that we can form real community online. And so that's a problem that I'm really trying to look at solving. And we're talking about how to solve that problem. Because if we would never say to someone, you belong to the church because you come on a Sunday. No. You belong to the church because you're in community, you're together, you do all those things. And so somehow church world has gotten into the situation where, okay, if you're only viewing it online, now you're in church. No, you're not in church just because you watch the service online. There's got to be community attached to it. And so how can we do that? And I think that's the thing that happens with problems. Problems become so big and we go, okay, what have we always done? And then we go back to what we've always done, as opposed to going, okay, let's have faith for an attitude that can solve a difficult problem. Because as soon as you have attitudes, you can overcome it, like the resources, the people, the ideas, all that comes along with it.
Something I'm encouraged by is I try to remind myself that God is always trying to do something new. But it's way easier to look back and see what he's done, because it can maybe put your heart at ease, and at least you kind of know, you can wrap your head around it, which is so human. We want to just be able to just kind of calculate it and figure it out. And I mean, we were doing a series on faith even, and just about how it's so human to want to just form, like God wants to do a miracle, but we first want to figure out how he's going to do the miracle and just formulate it. And then when it makes logical sense,
sign off on it.
We can just say, okay, cool, God, this is going to be great. I see what you did there. Where God has always been about, I mean, in Isaiah, it speaks about his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. And I hold tight to the promise and the truth that God is doing something new. And with problems comes great solutions. I mean, just speaking about Church Online, you read a stat to us as a staff team, just about how many millions of people were reached through the Church Online platform. I think it was the second or third week. It was very early in the lockdown day. And I mean, that was outstanding, where a lot of people, or the enemy, could have figured, well, this will be great for me, very bad for the church, because we're just going to close every church's doors in the world. But now suddenly there was someone who was innovative, who was creating a solution for a problem that had not yet existed in COVID, and then there were millions of people who were able to engage and connect with church. So I want to remind myself that even I might not know how this problem is going to be solved, God is doing something new.
100%.
Before Moses put his staff in the water, I don't think a sea had split before. But he had faith to trust that God was with him, and he felt a call to do something, to step out in faith and to put his staff in the water, and then the sea split. I'm not saying that that's what it's going to look like for us, but I'm saying there could be something big if we can have an attitude of every problem can be solved.
Yeah.
It might just look different. And God wants to use me, just like he used Moses.
I think that's it. Like you say, this problem can be solved.
Yeah.
Now, we've got to understand, is it a problem? I think Andy Stanley teaches us, is it a problem or is it a tension?
Good.
Right, there's a difference between, because tensions you can't solve, right? Tensions are discussion.
You got to live with the tension.
Live with the tension. It's you give in, you move forward, you move back. It's like a dance, right? You got to hold the tension, right? Like a balance between family life and work life, and healthy eating, and
you don't just say cheers work life or cheers family. You can't solve it like that.
It's a tension, right? It moves.
Yeah.
But problems are events that can be solved, or things that can be solved. A solution exists for. If there's a problem, there is a solution that exists or is about to exist because you're there facing it.
Good.
And I think that's like, even this church online thing again. Like, I was listening to somebody today who really stretches my thinking, and he was saying in his church, through lockdown, people reached out to them to see how they could be part of their community from other parts of the world, and now they've opened up sort of in-person services in 400 homes across the world.
Jeez.
I mean, that's incredible.
That's insane.
So now there's expressions of the church in parts of the world that possibly weren't there before.
Yeah.
And I'm just inspired by that there is a way. We just have to find God's way for us through that. And as it relates to people's problems, like, we all have problems we have to face. The point is, there is a new solution.
Yeah.
Like, or there's just wisdom, and you have to figure, like, is there wisdom or is there something new that needs to be solved?
Yeah.
But in either way, just having that big attitude like you're talking about, going, you know what, there is a solution here, and we're going to find it.
I love that point on wisdom. And I think, and maybe chat about that quickly, but I think as leaders, I think when problems arise, we need to almost see them as opportunities as well. Because I think where there have been problems in the past, let's take the past 18 months or 2 years, where there have been problems, they have really turned out to be opportunities for some churches to kick on, to become better, to step into a new way of doing things. And I think with personal problems, and for the people listening and watching, they could be thinking about their families, problems for their families, or the teams that they lead, or even at work. It's when a problem arises, like, what can we take? There's a learning from this. There's possibly an opportunity. There's possibly a new way of doing things and living life. But you mentioned wisdom there quickly, and I think that's brilliant, and I think that's a key part of being a problem-solving leader, is someone who has wisdom or knows where to find wisdom. Where have you gone when you've kind of figured out in your life, or there's been points in your life, it's like, well, I need more wisdom on this thing, or I need more, I want the wisdom, because, I mean, you talk about Proverbs, talk about these things. Wisdom is a huge part of kind of the Christian journey. I think leaders should pursue wisdom. Well, where was that kind of starting point for you when it comes to wisdom?
I love it in the scriptures. It says that you can ask God for wisdom and God will give you wisdom.
Yeah.
It's not like He will first see if you're worthy of wisdom or if you're in the right space. He says, if you ask me, I will give you wisdom.
Yeah.
Simple.
It's a good starting point.
So I always ask God for wisdom in decisions, always. I listen to people who, I think, because once you start praying for wisdom, you recognize wisdom. And so then I start listening to people and recognizing wisdom in their voice.
Good, yeah. Is that something that you've kind of picked up over time, hearing different people, different voices?
Yeah.
So, that's wise. That's
for instance, wisdom, yeah. For some people, I go to wisdom for finances. Another person, I go to wisdom for relationships or marriage. So you kind of pick up who is talking long term, because long term is wisdom.
Good,
short term is just fancy or trend or whatever. So but again, when you start praying for wisdom and you're reading the scripture and you're getting scriptural wisdom, then you start recognizing other voices who have wisdom.
Good.
Because wisdom has a distinctive voice.
Yeah.
So for instance, a lot of people have financial problems, but there's a very easy wisdom. You don't need a new creative solution unless you've had a mishap. Like maybe you need to find a new solution for your business, or you need to find a new solution for a job. Like that, that exists. But the kind of problem I'm talking about is there's always more money than money, and like this is stuff that we still go through. But the reality is, the wisdom of God is that if you spend more than you earn, you have financial problems. And it's not to knock it, because I know things are getting more expensive and everything, but we still have control over a lot of those things. And so you got to identify, okay, am I being foolish? Like, am I spending stupid? If you're spending stupid, cut your spending.
Yeah.
If you're not spending stupid, then trust God for a solution to increase your income. I mean, there's only two ways it can go: either drop the price, the expense, or so I mean, those are common things. Maybe if someone's in a business and the business is struggling financially, or maybe you can solve the problem in that business by coming up with some new cost-cutting initiatives.
Good, yeah.
And then you get elevated to another place of leadership because you've solved a problem that no one else can solve, or no one thought of solving. You know, it's like just things like the difference between wisdom, I think, and solving unique problems.
I enjoy that. And I think that for anybody that's watching or that's listening, we've all got a unique sphere of influence, a unique place where we want leadership, where we want to be able to solve problems. And I think I love how you said that, you'll go to different people that have got a different maybe level of understanding when it comes to finances or a long marriage, and they can share wisdom from that. I think that's vital. I mean, we were watching a podcast last night as a life group, speaking about going to people, you're wanting to be able to think better about different things and handle situations better and even problem solve better, to come alongside a leader or somebody that is in that sphere, in that realm of influence, but is like 10, 20, 30 steps ahead. Because it's easier to get someone who's maybe in the same lane as you and a similar season, a similar time, and a similar walk, but they might just be telling you kind of what you want to hear, or they haven't necessarily acquired the wisdom or learned or had the lessons. If you speak about failing forward in the beginning, had those failing forward moments. And I find that if I can get people around me that if I want to solve problems in my marriage or as a leader, to go and to find people that are that far ahead, and those are often challenging conversations because they will get you to think on a level you're not at that level. So you're saying you like listening to podcasts where people stretch your thoughts. It's like having those conversations, those type of people, it's on a different level. So sometimes it can be difficult. Sometimes it can be like, but how do you get how? And it can be so challenging. But to have those, I find that you can jump levels. Like you can skip parts. You can skip some failures by having those people, especially with problem solvers, people that are. If you're leading a business or with your family and you just find someone who's just been there, done that a little bit longer, he might teach you the solutions to problems that you still need to face, and you can just be like, well, that's how we're going to overcome it.
That's very good. Yeah. I was reading the Proverbs. I committed a couple of months to reading a proverb every day. So whatever the day of the month was the proverb I was reading.
Good.
Developed the saying through that a proverb a day keeps the fool in me at bay. Because the fool wants to rule my life.
He likes to come up.
He likes, of us. So it's always just making that decision of like, okay, I'm going to follow the way of wisdom. And it's the way of maturity and development. And I'm actually reading a book right now that I wholeheartedly disagree with 100%.
Isn't that a struggle?
And it's frustrating, but it's stretching my thinking to go, okay, it's not just... And that's like, even coming back to problem solving, you need to see a problem from different angles.
Good.
And so this person is tackling a certain problem that they see from their perspective. Now, I have a different perspective, but I get an insight that I couldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it's good for me to see that side and this side so we can creatively find a way through.
I don't know if you do this, but I often, when I was younger, I would have conversations with somebody, and then when it was like a blatant, like you can feel and sense that the way that they think and live is just so different and so far apart, I would subconsciously almost like, and I like just shut off, and I'm just like, there's nothing of like totally, and I might be exposing myself a little bit here, but I'm like, there will actually be nothing of any type of value that can come from this person right now, and that was one of the hardest lessons to learn.
And that look just comes over your face.
Just doof, you're just like, I'm not here right now. But as I've kind of studied more and had more conversations about leadership, it's actually, like you're saying now, I just want to just give testimony to what you're saying, because it's actually in those conversations where a lot can be learned. It doesn't necessarily mean that my whole way of thinking and doing things needs to change. But if it's just a perspective, or if it's just a slightly different way of looking in our current, what we're speaking about, a problem, or just a current way of doing things, you could learn so much from when you just. But we've got to fight off that willingness. As soon as someone, like, because there's big controversial things today, and people are for this and against that, and often someone who's on the other side of the fence, you find a conversation randomly, and you're just like, oh, okay, well, if they're like that, there's obviously nothing. It's a mistake, especially as a leader. I think that there's so much that we can gain and learn, and not about changing everything, but just don't shut off in those conversations. I think there's wisdom
big time
to be had and to be made
like there. Diverse thinking, empathy, understanding.
Big time. Those small things.
Just those few character things that really help.
Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, I think the bottom line of what we're trying to come across is that for people, for you to lead in your own life, you need to be a private problem solver, overcoming doubt, overcoming disappointment, overcoming struggles makes you stronger, makes you more effective, helps you to walk in more confidence, greater effectiveness, overcome laziness for some people, learning how to have a to-do list or a calendar. Like, those are problems that we can solve. They might seem small, but it's often the small ones that get left unsolved that causes biggest problems in the end. And then in that, you begin leading yourself.
Yeah.
And I think at the basis of every leader and every disciple is, am I being discipled, and am I growing as a leader for myself?
Yeah.
Because then I win the right to lead and disciple others.
Very good.
And so I think that is the shift, that, okay, we have to lead ourselves in overcoming problems so that we can overcome bigger problems that other people might come to you to the solution for.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's what businesses should be doing. They should be solving people's problems.
Yeah.
And then people buy the solution from them.
Yeah. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
So we got a couple steps maybe we can speak through.
Good how-to, like.
Just the how-tos, just some basic.
Best practice. Best practice,
just some things that leaders that have become problem solvers in their own right, in their own field, things that they've applied, things that they've brought into their lives that have helped them become problem-solving leaders. And maybe we can speak about a few of them. And the first one that I quite liked was, a problem-solving leader has intuition. They see something almost before it happens, and I think this is a muscle that's developed. It's a bit like discernment almost. And I think about a leader that is able to, and I think this grows more difficult almost the larger your organization or your ministry or that type of thing grows. But it's someone's ability to just sense that something might be off. There might be a problem coming. There might be something developing with that couple or with that person or in that particular department, and then to be able to move kind of your heart, move your mind, maybe even move a little bit of your focus towards that thing, almost before the problem becomes kind of a big issue. And it's easy to talk about because maybe we're like, oh, but I've just had a bunch of problems blow up in my face. I'm obviously not. I think it's something that you can develop and you can get better at by having almost your heart and maybe your ear a bit closer to the ground. But I think it's difficult as things get bigger. Some tools that something that you'd say, what's helped you do that kind of in your journey, is to say, I've been able to identify, or is it something that you haven't been able to do?
No, I don't think it, I don't know if that's something you can work at other than being connected to people. Yes. I don't think you can work at it. I think it's a skill I think it's something that comes from taking responsibility.
Okay.
So, for instance, like my pastor, Graham, it would be interesting. All of a sudden, he'd come in and it's like, listen, what about this? And you're like, oh, what about that? It's like, I don't feel right about this. And then you dig a little bit and you go, oh, flip, there's actually something wrong here. And I've had that, and it's developed as well. Like, where it's got this, I've got a sense about this. I've got a sense about this person. There's nothing I can't put my finger on it. I can't describe it, but there's something there. And I think what it is because when you grow as a leader, you see things first. Yeah. Because you're almost higher in the organization or whatever it is that you're leading. And so you just see further down the road than somebody else does because you've got greater responsibility. There's a greater burden. There's the buck stops with you. Yeah. So there is an intuition that develops over time. Yeah. So I don't think it's something that you can just work on other than being connected to people, except maybe taking responsibility and actually caring more about what it is that you have.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, with my son, if there's something wrong internally, he doesn't have to say it. I pick it up from his body language. But somebody else who doesn't know him as well or care as much won't pick it up.
Yeah.
So I think it is a little bit about where you are in the organization and
Yeah.
how much responsibility and care you have for it. But certainly go with your gut.
Yes.
At times I've
That's a good
put
one.
off my gut and I'm like, no, I'm being silly, only for it to bite me a couple of months down the line. And I've done that many times. So
yeah. Good. I agree. I think for that in particular, it's something that I've also, I think with time, and I think the more the I love what you said, responsibility. I think the more that the buck stops with you, the more maybe you think about things, the more attention you give it, the higher its priority and importance is in your life. I think this then gets better.
Yeah.
So I think if you want to be someone who's maybe more kind of discerning and has that initiative even before something gets really big, I love that. I think try to take a bit more responsibility.
Absolutely.
Try to think more about the people, spend time with the people. Because let's say if you're leading a group of people, if you do spend time with them, like you're saying, if Samuel's got something internally happening, I've seen him when he's good. Like I've seen him when there's no issues and there's something different now. And then even if it's just a sense, it's like that grows with that relationship that you build with people.
100%. Yeah. I think it's funny. Like, I don't even think you can get too much of that feeling for what somebody else is leading.
Yes.
You know, it's strange. Like some people say, I think you need to do this differently or do that. And you're like, but
just a feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have no responsibility in this whole setup. So
I agree.
You can say it. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything.
No.
You know, and the leader would be like, yeah, I don't see that happening. So I think there is like, you know, I think you get that for what is
you're
under
doing.
your responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think the next one that I quite liked was just for leaders is, leaders investigate. What's so important about that?
Let's get your insight into that, please.
Yeah, especially when people present problems. And I related so much to what you said kind of right in the beginning of the podcast, which is people come and bring issues. And as a leader, it can be frustrating. But then you need to remind yourself of what your role is. You're leading people. In our context, it's leading people, it's helping people, it's guiding. So that is a part of it. So one of the most important things in being a problem-solving leader is an ability to investigate, especially if you're someone like me who might hear a bit of bad news or something troubling or something concerning, and then I just want to solve. I think it might be something with my personality, but I like to just get things solved and sorted. Like if I have to go to sleep at night and I'm just unpacking my deepest, darkest secrets. If I have to go to sleep at night knowing that something isn't cool, like with genre, I'll struggle. It's just my makeup. I'm like, I can't sleep on it. Don't tell me to sleep on it. I can't stew on it. I'm like, so for me, that has been something that I've had to develop. It's like, okay, let's get all the pieces. There's a couple of role players here. I get that you're offended or that you're hurt or that person did that thing, but I think you can make the mistake of going kind of just full steam ahead with not every piece of information. Yeah. I think that it's going to hurt you as a leader who wants to solve and get to the right solution for everybody. You might steamroll one person and that's that particular person's problem solved, but it's not what everybody needs. It's not what the organization needs. So an ability to investigate and to not stop, geez, that's been a growing curve for me.
That is good. I think you're so right. Like you can just go steamrolling in because of a feeling or because of one person's perspective on it, and you haven't even heard anybody else's perspective on it or where the problem comes from. I think you could probably end up blowing things up a little bit more.
Definitely.
Than not. I can't say that I'm particularly great at that, but
I think I would say you're probably better than me in that field, because often the problem is also not the problem. Like you have to. Like the problem that's first presented, often it's deeper. Like if somebody is offended or feels a certain way about a person or a people group, as soon as you have a bit more of a deeper conversation, you find that there is something else.
You know what, Phil? Can't we all just get along and be okay? Like,
can we all not just love one another?
As you said that, I can feel this tightness in my chest developing. I'm like,
it's an anxiety provoker.
Why has this got to be so hard? Like, why is there all this tension wrapped around this thing? Why is it such high maintenance? But the reality is,
that's leading, huh?
That's leading.
Yeah, so true.
And I think the win for people who are in roles of leadership is to, as much as possible, put that decision making down the line, so you solve less and less problems, but the big ones.
Good. And
you have other people who solve size appropriate problems.
Yeah.
And give them the authority for that. So you don't have to be all anxious about,
What's happening on that level when it's like there's other people who can solve that. We'll talk about that. I think another really cool key about a problem-solving leader is that they're communicators. And ideally, they're able to communicate with some trusted people, some close people who are able to give. Because often, I like to believe that I might have all the answers, but unfortunately, I don't. So there could be a problem, or there could be an issue or something that has arisen, and I've gone and I've been a good problem-solving leader, and I found all the information.
That's the thing when you're a natural talent, hey?
I can just do it all, and then you've gone through the rights, you've made enough mistakes, you've got all the information. Sometimes the ability to communicate with people that you trust, and people that, like we mentioned earlier, a bit further ahead, they could also give you the perspective, and they can also give you the insights and the advice. I just think about all the greatest kings. Like, I never did history in high school, so I like watching documentaries on Netflix now. And the guys that used to do particularly well in kind of dominating and the armies and all of that stuff is that they had a great council of people around them that were usually quite different. And I know that could be quite negative in some insights, but for what we're speaking about today, I think having voices around you that when things aren't particularly the way you want them, but how you can help solve or resolve an issue, being a communicator is important. You don't want to just keep all that, like you speaking about that anxiety and the tightness, you don't want to just keep all of those issues, everything on to yourself. I mean, that's going to break you at some point, I would think.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, because sometimes you just need someone to tell you stop being an idiot.
Deal with it.
Yeah. Just don't be such a baby.
Yeah.
Or you just need someone to give you a perspective.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think probably for guys this can be quite hard.
Yeah.
Because we want to feel like we can solve I think women have this in a better way. Not all women, but women have this communication thing happening on multiple levels, where they'll tell trusted people quite easily. I think guys do struggle with that, but I think the best way is to have some people. Maybe someone's a lightning rod, or someone is just a word of wisdom.
Yeah, I think if talking is something that maybe you struggle with, particularly another point that we got there was that some leaders write things down, and it makes it easier to just kind of pen to paper, put the issue down in front of you, and it helps you kind of process in that way. And I think process is important, that for you, that you've got a piece and you've got an understanding of where I want this to go. As a leader who wants to solve problems, as a leader who wants to help and add value, if communicating is not your thing, I think you should try and do that. But even writing down and processing and making sure you understand everything holistically, I think could be quite helpful. I'm not a big journaler, or I prefer speaking. I prefer getting people that I can talk to in barns. But I've met people who are big journalists, and I've heard that even during quiet times and stuff like that it can be incredibly helpful and insightful in just putting everything down and for yourself being able to process information. So even in solving problems, it could be something that could be helpful to people.
Absolutely. And I think, the way you're talking about it is really, really insightful, because I think you can't solve a problem that you cannot describe.
Yeah, or define.
Yeah, you need it. So, and then even talking to a team about it.
Yeah.
Like, hey team, this is the problem. How can we solve this problem? And just having that level of communication with people around a solution. We don't want to hop on the problem forever, because that doesn't solve it. We want to, as quickly as possible, get to the solution.
Yeah.
So I think even communication across that way about forming solutions is so important with people.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about why you don't journal, but that's for another podcast.
we can unpack I don't know, I like writing. I just have never journaled. Okay. I probably should get into that.
I think if anyone's watching or listening right now, they should hype you on journaling right now.
Buy me a moleskin journal. I'll do it. Just moving on, for one of the other things, the problem-solving leader. You get to the point now, maybe you've done all these things and you've got all the information, you've chatted to people, maybe you've written it down, but then it comes to the point where you've actually got to lead, and you've got to make a decision, and you've got to make the choice. And we spoke a bit about this already in the podcast, where for some people this is the difficult part. All the other stuff could be easy, but the actual this is the decision we're going to make, this is the direction we're going to move, this is how we're going to solve this problem, if it's between people or if it's an organizational problem or financial problem, this is what we're going to do. And I think that this is a huge thing for leaders to understand, that there will come a time and a point where you've just got to make the choice.
But what do you do, Phil, if the choice that you make, after all of that, thinking about the effect it's going to have on people and communicating and processing all, what do you do when there's some people who don't like your solution?
I think you've got to figure out the people that are with you and the people that aren't with you. So as a leader, hopefully as leaders, we're leading something. There's people following us. So if the people that are following you are kind of not with you on the decisions that you make, and you're doing your due diligence of hearing from God and trying your best to understand all sides of the party, or trying to understand all sides of the issue, and then you're saying, well, this is the direction we want to go to. I think if somebody has an issue with you like once or twice, you can take it a bit further and you can have more conversation about it, and you can figure out maybe what the point is. But if there are certain people or groups that are just feel like every single decision that you make, there is a problem, there is an issue, I would think that it might be a good time to have a conversation, trying to figure out if these people are, if they're on the bus, if they're not on the bus, if they're with you, if they're not with you. Because as leaders, a part of the decision-making process is failing, is getting it wrong. Yeah. That's the risk you run as being a leader. We can't be scared of that. We can't be scared of making the mistake. We can make sure that we're doing our side of the research and the diligence, and we're trusting God, and we're trying to make a decision that honors Him and honors what we're trying to build. But I think from the people side of things, and people are just, there's a tension and people are coming up against you, I think that's good. I don't think we should be leaders that just everyone's a yes man. I don't know if there's too much growth there, as nice as that sounds. I don't think that's the healthiest, but I think it's about, is this person trying to make us better, or is this person trying to get their opinion across, or is it about what they think? That's kind of how I've seen it.
Yeah. I think so. I agree. I think you have to make a call.
Yeah.
And on the best information you have, and it's not always going to be.
It's not always going to be the right call.
It's not always going to be the right call. Sometimes you're going to make a mistake. But again, I'd rather make a mistake trying to solve a problem than make the mistake of leaving the problem.
Good.
And just thinking it's going to go away, because it never does. It actually gets worse. The longer it stays, the worse it gets. And sometimes that's within marriages, a decision.
Yeah.
And you got to be okay with making mistakes, and then being big enough to say, yeah, I messed up. But you know what? We're attempting to solve a big problem, and it requires us to have a go.
Yeah.
So yeah, like some people aren't always going to love the journey. But you know, if you're always scared of that, you're never going to solve a problem.
Because that's a real fear.
It is a real fear.
Especially with decision makers and leaders that need to make decisions that can alter the course of something. And I think that's such an important thing, that if we're so scared of what are people going to think? Like, that's me. Like, I'm like, what are people going to think? Like, and that's a fear. But if that is going to determine, it might not be the right time for you to be leading then, because it's like, it's if you feel called, you know, by God to do this thing and to lead this thing and to solve these problems as a problem-solving leader, we've got to be able to fight that.
Totally.
Not fight against opposition, or not fight against people wanting to make us better and be better, but that, like, you've always got a problem thing.
That's right.
We've got to be able to lead through that.
I mean, taking it back to David and Goliath, like David's brothers criticizing him. Yeah, you just want to be the big shot.
Yeah, go back to your few sheep.
Your few sheep, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, and you're always going to have people. But if David listened to that, they would still be standing in the valley, you know, listening to Goliath chant. You know, they would have died without fighting.
Yeah.
And the reality is, David had the courage to go and solve the problem.
Do it anyway.
And go for it. Yeah, go for it. So again, like, we're not saying impulsively, but we're saying after the whole process, you still have to go.
Yeah.
You know, not just check the problem's done in my head, but actually never do anything. That's not going to help. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help anybody else.
Yeah.
So I love that. Like Elon Musk solving the problem of, I don't know.
Space,
travel, time.
Doing things different.
Continuum, world peace.
Yeah, there you go. So he's there. And for a lot of people that are like, okay, cool. So it sounds like we've come to the end of it. Well, to be honest, I think the real end of it is that a problem-solving leader creates more problem-solving leaders.
Good. I love that.
In the process of everything we're doing. So we want to empower.
Explain that, yeah.
We want to empower people. So if we're in a position where maybe there's an easy one, not as often as what we think, maybe there's an easy problem to solve, and you maybe have a solution, or you've worked on it and you figured something out. A great way to do problem solving today, especially as leaders who want to raise up other leaders, is you don't necessarily have to solve the problem for someone. Solve it with them. Try to get them alongside. Try to help them see things the way that you see it. Take them on the journey of understanding things the way that maybe you've gone on the journey to understand them, and give them perspective. Give them an understanding. Hey, this is how we got to this solution. And whenever you're in a moment like this again, I trust that you'll be able to solve this by yourself. You won't need someone like me. There'll always be bigger problems where we need insights of a leader or someone who's walking the journey with us. But we want to constantly, as leaders in any sphere, and I think in problem solving, how amazing is it if you have got leaders under you that are solving problems that you didn't even know existed?
What a blessing.
What a blessing. Like you just hear, hey, there was a problem.
What a compliment, actually.
Exactly. Like there was a problem, but I've taken care of it.
Absolutely.
And I think we all want leaders like that under us, but it kind of starts with if we are going to be problem solving leaders in our own right.
I love that.
Let's solve problems. Like let's take people on the journey.
So good.
Let's show people how we're solving problems. Let's give people, and you use the word authority. You're giving people room. You're giving them a chance to fail, to mess up. And then, I mean, Trevor Coleman was speaking about it at the conference that we attended. It's like, you figure it out. That's what if I'm wrong? Then you'll deal with the consequences.
You'll deal with the consequences.
But I mean, it's like that for everybody.
It is.
When if we get it wrong and what we're doing, we deal with the consequences. We want to give people the same space. Obviously, there will be a level of we'll look after you, and you're not going to
there's boundaries of safety.
There's boundaries of safety, but it's just, are we giving people room, or do we love the problem solving hat so much that we're not giving other people room to solve problems? I don't think that's the outcome. I think as we're solving problems, are we creating more problem solvers as well?
That's good. I think from the voice of maybe an older horse in the race, is that it's so easy. The tension and the struggle comes in when you've developed an intuition about what to do, and then you see somebody else and you're like, oh, but that's it. And you're like, oh, what did I just do? It's true. Like make it too easy for people sometimes, because we want the best for it, and we can get to the solution so much quicker if we just snap the.
But isn't it difficult? Like, and sorry, I'm interrupting you, but isn't it difficult? Like, what the right thing is, and then you're giving the people the room, and you're watching them do the wrong thing.
Yes,
isn't that difficult?
It's hard. No, it's hard, especially if you've got a bit of a controlling tendency, which I think I might have a little bit of a controlling tendency. And if you've got any of that, then it's going to be much, much harder.
Yeah.
Or if you know how you want to build something. So I think we probably, as leaders or people who are running things, need to understand, like, okay, what's the boundary of our culture? Go ahead and make a mistake, anything within that culture.
It's cool.
And then we learn about it, and we have a conversation, or we celebrate, And I think celebrate when someone's come up with a solution that's different to yours.
Good,
It might even take longer to solve.
Yeah.
But like that's how you grow. That's how I grow. I mean, that's how you grow. You go, oh, flip, I messed up. Let me make a different call this time. Yeah.
It's experiences. It's like it's life. And if we try to shelter all of the people we're trying to raise up from the very experiences that helped us become better leaders, it almost seems counterproductive.
Cool. Yeah, I love this one about Jesus, because Jesus did this really, really well. He's like, teaches for 3 years, heals people, raises people from the dead, goes to the cross, pays for the sin of the world, is resurrected, and he says, cool guys, I'm out of here. Go build a church.
Yeah.
And they're like,
what?
Shouldn't you stay here?
Yeah, don't you want to do it?
Yeah. Isn't that why you've come?
Yeah.
And I think we probably have to be quite similar to that and say, no, that's a big problem. You can do it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think that's the journey that we'll all go on, and for leaders, and I hope that everybody that's tuned in and listened and watched can be reminded that we're all leaders. Leadership is influence, and we all have influence in our own right. And a massive part of leadership and biblical leadership is the ability to solve problems.
Right.
And there's a journey that you go on. There's a way that we can get better. There's a way that we can improve. And at the end of it, we want to create more people who can solve problems, more leaders who can move the needle forward and can take things forward. Because I think we're all involved in something big. We're all involved in something important, and we want it to be the best it can be. So I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Frank, thank you for the use of the Garden of Eden.
Thank you, Jesus, literally, for this.
For the weather.
Imagine it was raining now. That would have been horrible.
We would have been in trouble.
Short thunderstorm. No, it's all good, and we're so grateful. I would, just for our listeners, and even for me, I feel quite inspired by this conversation. The world has big problems, and the world is in desperate need of leaders. Yeah. So let's go solve some problems.
Yeah, good.
Love it. Thanks so much. Thanks for the conversation, Phil. Thanks to our listeners. This has added value to you. Please share, like, subscribe if you can subscribe. And give us any feedback, anything that we can do better, constructive, any topics that we can touch on. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good one, and we will see you next time. Cheers.